At. This was one night. This was one night on the lower left, where we all went to the pokey. This was in demonstrating against police violence. That's CMOTAP. It was originally planned for only me to go in. When I went in, Betty decided she would go in, and then John saw Betty go in, and he felt he had to go in to protect her. But then they put us in different vans, so it didn't help. These are some of the forums we've had. We've had them on a number of subjects. You can see one on the left, which is a Zoom, one on the right, which is not. You see, we've dealt with issues such as the election. We've dealt with issues such as psychiatry and mental health. And we've had concerts, jazz concerts. We've had issues beyond voting. Things that had to do with Black women's heroism. We see Haki Madhubuti talking about the victory of John Henry Clark. This is a fraction, a small fraction of the forums that we've held. Here's one on reparations. Here's Dr. Asante talking about using the teachings of the Honorable Marcus Garvey in the 21st century. We also see Nana Camille Yarborough and Brother Raymond Duguay. This was a program we had where we had just one second, let me get all of these other people in. You are seeing the screen, right? Show me by a nod of the head if you're seeing the slides. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah.
Yes, you're seeing the slides. Okay. So on the left here, this is teaching young people how to repair computers. We had a course, a free course. We took some old recycled computers. A couple of community members taught them how to put those together over the course of about 4 or 5 weeks. And then when they finished, the computers worked and they got to take them home. These are some of the activities that we've had at CMOTAP over the years. We've been since 1987. That's really this is our 34th year. This is 2021. This was when this was a reception we had for her when she left us here in New York and went to Ohio. These are some more pictures of the youngsters with the computers. You see Brother Bernard White on the right there. He's not in town anymore. And you see that the youngsters, when they learned about computers, they were also doing it in a culturally congruous environment. You see Minister Farrakhan on the wall. You see Brother Jitu Ayusi. You see Brother Gil Noble. You can't see them out of sight of Brother Lynn Jeffries, Brother Alton Maddox, Sister Betty Dobson, all kinds of pictures of people. You see pictures of Queen Anne Nzinga. You see African heads. You see, these are some youngsters that were in a summer program. It was called the Sons of CMOTAP. They learned how to change a car tire. This is when we went down to the court to see them prosecuting our brother Michael Warren and his wife, Evelyn Warren, who were beaten up by the police when they tried to stop the police from beating up a youngster while he was handcuffed on the ground. So they got to see that firsthand. This is just one of our many meetings. In the background, up in the upper right-hand corner, I see Brother Kermit Edie. We now have a show on WBAI. It's called The Mind Field. Me and my wife, we hosted, Richardina. These are some of the people we've had. Our next speaker is going to be Brother Greg X. Moore. He's a substance abuse specialist, a member of the Nation of Islam, and he's written a personal memoir about his successful battle with substance abuse. He was also the Queen's co-chair of the Justice of Else March in 2018. After that, we have Bandy X. Lee. She's not in the Nation of Islam, but her middle name, I think, is Zenobia. She wrote the book, The Dangerous Case of Donald J. Trump, and she's going to be talking to us about whether that danger still exists. And down in the lower right-hand corner is somebody we all know, great psychologist, Dr. Wade Noble, and he's going to be talking about Black mental health. So my point is that CMOTAP is a media watch, media activist organization in existence since 1987. We're completely independent. Do not accept. Please mute yourself. Anybody who came in, please mute yourself. Don't make me search for you. Thank you. So we do not accept any government grants or funds of any sort. Through your support, we've come to have our own meeting center headquarters. You saw the building with the Sphinx up in the front. And despite the fact that we cannot use our building for meetings, we still pay water bill, gas bill, heating and light bill. We pay the Zoom fees even, and over $7,000 per year in building insurance. We have a sizable art collection. And so we still keep bills of over $800 a month, all during the COVID, even though we don't meet and or raise money in those meetings. So my point is, please give to CMOTAP in one of three ways. I'll be posting this in the chat. If you don't know what the chat is, down at the bottom of your screen, there's a little circle. It says chat. And if you click that, it's a way that you can message anybody in the group, or that they can message you, or you can message everyone in the group. And I'll be messaging you with three ways that you can donate to CMOTAP. You can donate through a Cash App at $ Dr. CMOTAP, Dr. CMOTAP, or two, by mailing to CMOTAP at 13505 Rockaway Boulevard, South Ozone Park, New York, 11420, or by donating with PayPal or credit card at this link, which is linked to our property insurance fund. So now with all of those housekeeping issues out of the way, I hope you can still hear me, and I can see you now. I'm going to just tell you that what we tried to attract people with was the issue of, as you're trying to make this decision, one of the first things you should do is ask your doctor, has he been vaccinated? Has she been vaccinated? If they have not been vaccinated, ask them why. If they have been vaccinated, ask them about any concerns that you might have. So this is not a debate per se, but we have at least one or more members who have been vaccinated, who are our speakers today, and they'll tell you why. And those people who have not, they'll be willing to tell you why also. So a little bit later in the meeting, I will tell you some of the questions that I have. One of the questions I have, and it's actually in that PowerPoint, which I ended, is if they say this vaccine works through messenger RNA, causing my body to make antibodies to a harmless, or actually causing my body to make a protein, a harmless protein, you tell me, from the virus, and then that will trigger an immune response in me that helps me to fight the virus. Why make a complex protein like messenger RNA? Why make my body make this harmless protein? Since you didn't have much time to test it, you didn't have enough time to do animal tests, why not give us a traditional type vaccine? I mean, if we're going to take a vaccine, why, if you have no time to test it, would you go to an entirely different technology in which you have to make my body make part of a virus? Why not the old killed virus protocol? Why not partial virus protocol? It's just a question. I don't know the answer, but we have experts here today who might be able to tell us. Another thing is what about the history of vaccines that had to be recalled years after their initiation? This COVID thing has only been with us about since the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020. How do you give us these assurances as we're given that it's perfectly safe and that the science supports it and so on? I don't see how you do that in such a short period of time when drugs such as thyroidazine, which originated in the 50s, wasn't until, in the 2000s, found to be harmful, found to cause heart arrhythmias that can kill you. So these are some of the kinds of questions that I have, and I'm hoping our experts will be able to help us with. I think that a person that says, well, I'm taking my chances, it's a risk, I consider that person can be an intelligent person. After they've considered, after they have the information and they make a decision, that's intelligence. But if you just listen to these politicians telling you what you should do, I think
can't hear. I can't hear. I can turn it off. We can't hear.
we can hear you. We can hear you. We need you to mute yourself. Okay. All of those little interruptions break your train of thought. But our first speaker that I'm going to call up is our youngest speaker. And she is a board certified family practitioner. And she has gotten the vaccine. I want to tell you that her African uncle, Dr. Hunter, I'm also her African uncle, but her African uncle, Dr. Hunter, will not be with us today. And the reason that Dr. Hunter will not be with us today is that he came down with COVID-19. He was severely debilitated, had to go to the hospital, and he selected as his treatment the monoclonal antibodies. That's what he selected as his treatment. And within 24 to 48 hours, he was feeling better. I spoke to him, he's feeling better, but he's just being cautious and still resting, but he won't be with us today. But Dr. Hooker, who was our first speaker, she chose to get the vaccine, and she'll tell us why. She told us a little bit why before, and so we're very happy to have her. Dr. Hooker, can you hear me? Can you unmute yourself? And let me see if I can find Dr. and help her. Dr. Nima Hooker, here she is. I'm gonna unmute. Dr. Hooker, can you hear me? I've asked you to unmute. Okay, I see her here. She's here with us, but I don't.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. Hooker. How are you?
Sorry about that.
So good to have you with us. So the floor is yours.
Okay, so speaking about why I got the vaccine.
Okay, did you have anything anybody who wants to screen share can also screen share if you want to.
No, I didn't have anything to screen share.
Okay, cool.
Um,
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your practice.
okay.
Tell us your thoughts about the virus and about the vaccine and why you made the decision.
Okay. All right. So my name is Naima Hooker. I am a family medicine physician here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dr. James McIntosh is actually my uncle. He and my father went to medical school together. And actually grew up in South Carolina, did all my training there, and now I practice here in Charlotte, North Carolina at a hospital-based outpatient practice and a little outside of the main part of the city. And yeah, I've been out of residency for almost 3 years now. So that's a little bit about myself, I guess. In terms of my experience with COVID-19 in practice, so of course this is a totally new virus, pandemic, nothing that I've experienced before. And so our practice actually acted pretty quickly with getting us to work from home and having very few clinicians. Because in my practice there, I work with 7 other providers, having very few clinicians in the practice and seeing mainly virtual visits. So we did virtual visits for quite some time with very limited office visits for about 3 months after March of last year, and kind of slowly transitioned to having patients come back into the office over the last few months. So that's, I guess, a part of the transition from the practice in terms of my experience with COVID. So we don't really see patients who have COVID-19 symptoms in the office. I don't work in the hospital. I don't treat patients who have COVID-19. I do see them in recovery. So if they follow up with me after they've done their quarantine and are feeling better or still having symptoms, or I'll see them virtually if they're complaining of symptoms and get them set up for testing. So that's kind of my role in treating patients who have COVID-19, virtual visits and seeing them post-vaccine. And then, of course, with the new, I said they can't hear me. I'm not.
We hear you.
Okay. With the new treatments that you can give to those 55 and over who have a pre-existing condition, it's the monoclonal antibodies. I also have the capability to get people set up to receive that once they're diagnosed with COVID-19 within a certain time period. So I think the next question is, why did I get the vaccine? Trying to go in order. So I think the main thing for me was seeing patients after they had COVID-19 and 2-3 months out still dealing with symptoms from it. I think the media focused a lot on, the deaths related to the mortality related to it, but didn't really speak on a lot of the morbidity or how patients still experienced a lot of symptoms after having the diagnosis. And that's what really, I guess, stood out to me because, I have patients, and I guess I'll share like a patient story, like so she's probably like 45-year-old patient, generally healthy and, maybe a little overweight, but this is somebody who exercises, tries to eat right. She's a nurse manager and came down with COVID and, had the typical symptoms, fevers, chills, cough, shortness of breath, was able to maintain herself at home, didn't have to be admitted to the hospital or anything. But, I saw her in the office 3 weeks later and she's still dealing with shortness of breath to the point where walking upstairs, you have to sit down at the top to catch your breath. And this is 3 weeks after having COVID. And other people who've had like the loss of taste and smell, which lets us know that the virus has, affected your brain, and having brain fog, which she also had, where you have memory issues, poor concentration. Those are the two big neurologic symptoms, the headaches continually, after you have the virus as well. So, and not to mention those who are really sick in the hospital with sepsis and everything else with organ failure related to that you have to kind of manage after you recover. So it was kind of what they call now long COVID syndrome, which is it's still being studied like most of the things with the virus, that kind of made me want to get the vaccine because the death rate from COVID is, I think, 1.5% of people who caught it, but those people who deal with those debilitating symptoms afterwards is, I think, 6, 8, or 10%. So that was one of the main reasons that I wanted to get the vaccine. I think they're doing research now to see if those people who had the post-COVID syndrome or long COVID syndrome, who now get the vaccine, do their symptoms improve? And I think there's like some small amount of preliminary evidence to say that some of those people do actually get relief of those continual shortness of breath, dyspnea, exertion, cough symptoms after getting the vaccine. And so that patient that I was talking about earlier, she came to me and she had to get short-term disability to be written out of work because she couldn't do her job duties, which required walking the hospital, and she would get very short of breath with that and still couldn't concentrate on her work, and short-term memory loss where you have to know what's going on with your patients and the nurses that are under you, and you're unable to remember those, the things that you have to do in order to do your job. So I just saw her like a week ago, and now she's 3 months out 3 months out from having COVID, and she's still experiencing the same symptoms. Going to be able to go back to her job at all. So, and that's just one patient. I probably have like 6 or 7 of those stories of just my patient panel of those who I actually see after getting the COVID, after having COVID-19. So that was kind of the one of the big things for me that was like, okay, I think I want to go ahead and get this. So that even if it's a mild symptoms, it doesn't have to be severe symptoms for you to end up having these prolonged, protracted symptoms. I think somebody asked which one did I get. I got the Pfizer vaccine, which is one of the mRNA vaccines, and the 2 vaccine sequence that you have to get. And I think I got the first one December, I think it was like right before the holidays, like December 23rd. And I got the second one like January 23rd, around that time. I got the first vaccine. I didn't have any symptoms at all. Arm soreness for about 12 hours, and then I was fine. The second one, I did have arm soreness for about 2-3 days, and I had a little bit of headache and fatigue for about 24 hours, and that was it. Felt back to myself. So, and I just looked on the CDC website to see if there had been, because I think a lot of patients have been coming to me saying, that they're afraid to get the vaccine because they see a lot of the news is saying that there's a lot of deaths related to the COVID-19 vaccine, the mRNA, Pfizer or Moderna. And I just wanted to look that up to see where that information was coming from. And it looks like the CDC and the vaccine, the committee that monitors vaccinations, say they've gotten reports of people who have died after getting the vaccine, but it's not at a rate higher than normal population. So it's not related to getting the vaccine. So as far as we know, I think we're like 7 months now into the first administration with the study, and there hasn't been any adverse events outside of course, allergic reaction and symptoms of fevers, chills, those type of immune reaction symptoms that people experience with typical vaccines anyway. I think I addressed the questions, right? Did I miss something?
You sure did. You sure did. And I'm just glad that I'm going to ask everyone to please mute yourself. I was hoping you would not feel nervous because you're with family here. Just as everybody here is just like me and just like you. I want to ask you this. In medicine, we deal with something called risk-benefit ratio, right? Okay. So you told us the risk, and the perceived benefit. But what about how were you able to assess the risk of the vaccine? It sounds like you were taking just current statistics and current things that the CDC has said. Now, questions that some of us might have would be, how do you trust the CDC when the CDC was responsible? And see, I can understand you because this was before your lifetime, but it wasn't before my lifetime.
Right.
I was probably, I was old enough, to really experience this in real time, in which they voted to continue the Tuskegee experiment and didn't stop until it was exposed in the papers in 72. In 69, they voted to continue this experiment, even though they had very good antibiotics at the time. The person who held that meeting was the head of the venereal disease section of the CDC. His name was David Sensor. And he went on from there to be in charge of the swine flu vaccination program. The swine flu vaccination program had its problems, which I won't go into right now. But then, even after all those things, none of those people were punished for the Tuskegee experiment. None of those people were punished for continuing the experiment. In fact, David Sensor went on to become the Commissioner of Health in New York City. And he became Commissioner of Health in New York City in the 1980s. So now this is really now getting into a point I can remember very well. I was a physician by this time. And so my trust of the CDC may be different from yours, but I know that as a doctor, you've read, and so you know some of these historical things. So how did you deal with the risk part and the trust part? And then especially the other question I have for you in that same vein is that you're a young woman of childbearing age. I'm sure, you know, you were taught in medical school about thalidomide. Thalidomide was a medication, and you know it was approved. There was no danger when people first took it, but then after some women who were pregnant uh, came down with the issue of teratogenicity. There's no way to know about teratogenicity in 6 months. You can't even have a baby in 6 months. So there's no way to know. So how did you deal with that part of it? How did you deal with the risk part? That's my question. Hold it, you disappeared. Oh, okay, now we hear you again.
Okay. So, kind of a difficult question. I definitely.
Somehow you're not as loud as you were before. Are you speaking to the same mic?
Yeah, my computer is turned up. If I switch positions, does that help any?
I don't know, but I hear you. I hear you, but it's just not as well as before.
Okay.
Very, very low.
Okay, go ahead, Nima. You talk. Go ahead and talk. We can hear you though. No, now we don't hear you at all, and you're not muted. You're not muted. I'm looking at it. I don't know what happened.
Sometimes it's the
Did something come loose? Something become detached?
No, I hear you well.
Okay, I hear you slightly. If you hear Nima at all, please raise your hand.
Is there a way to reload, Mom? Is there a way to reload? Yeah, it is. They were just hearing me. I didn't do anything.
Okay, Dr. Hooker, we cannot hear you well. Nothing's blocking your microphone. No setting was changed.
Maybe I can leave and come back.
Isn't that interesting? Okay, so what I'm going to do, Dr. Hooker, I'm going to move to a speaker that I don't know whether they've taken their, in fact, let's keep it in the same order we kept it before. I'm going to call on Dr. Gorman. Dr. Gorman is down in South Carolina, and he is a gastroenterologist. Dr. Gorman, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so maybe you want to both give your presentation and respond a little bit to Dr. Hooker.
Dr. Hooker actually very eloquently stated a lot of things that I did that I used in my decision. As of the last forum, I had not taken the vaccine. Since that time, I have. Also, since that time, we have had 8 family members to die from the virus. And that idea of long COVID is very real, because I've seen that around me, even in people who were infected and had no symptoms at all. Very many of them are having extremely severe and debilitating symptoms. My decision had a lot to do with the fact that early on in the process of COVID, this time last year, I can say that the chief of my service at the VA hospital where I'm currently employed tried to protect me by removing me from direct patient contact, so that I did mostly video patient contact and telephonic patient contact. Because of the backlog, however, I had to soon start doing face-to-face procedures as well as visits. And at that time, not only was I living here with my wife, but we were taking care of my mother-in-law, who was at an advanced age and debilitated. So I certainly did not want to risk the possibility of becoming infected and infecting my family. All those went into my decision. And the other thing was that after the vaccine became available, I followed it very closely to see if anybody would grow another head or 3 more legs. And I didn't hear about that happening. So I said that maybe it's okay. I did due diligence. I have read and reread the work of Harriet Washington, who showed us that not only was the Tuskegee experiment a horrendous example of what could happen to us here in America, but she highlighted many other instances in which that happens, so that whenever we make a decision to take a risk like a vaccine, I think that we should consider the negatives as well as the positives. And I think that we should evaluate the negatives, because in my conversations with people, I often find that their decisions or their opinions are based on what they say. And these folk are frequently unable to answer my next question, which is, who is they? And what expertise does they have? In my understanding, the mRNA technology was actually under investigation prior to the development of these vaccines, and they just used it to try to fit into that gap. I took the Moderna vaccine, and I am one of the people who got sick as all get up after my second vaccine for about 36 hours. And then I woke up the next day feeling even better than I did before I got sick. The question that you posed, Dr. McIntosh, about long-term effects of the vaccine are very real. I think that I don't have an answer. One of the things that I think doctors don't do enough is to say, I don't know. And is very frequently some of these decisions that we make are in essence a leap of faith, because we don't know. Let me look through the comorbidities. Comorbidities actually increase, as I understand it, these comorbidities, diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, chronic lung disease, chronic heart disease, not only increase your chances of developing the virus, but they also markedly increase decrease your chances of surviving the virus. So comorbidities are very, very important. And we know as African people that we have a lot of these comorbidities, not only physically, but psychologically. And that the environmental racism, speaking of the physical environment as well as the psychological environment, uh, it plays heavily in that. One last thing is that with regard to the Tuskegee experiment, it started at a time when a pseudoscience called eugenics was very popular, to the extent that many medical schools actually had courses in eugenics. And as I understand it, University of Virginia Medical School was one of the primary institutions that taught this as a course. And also, as I understand it, several physicians who were intimately involved with the development of the Tuskegee experiment were graduates of the University of Virginia. The significance of that, I think you'd have to draw your own conclusion, and I would invite everyone to check me on that, because I do remember reading
I'll be on
articles to
Zoom.
that extent. So I'll stop now, and I look forward to questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gorman. But the next doctor I'm going to call up, I'm going to share screen again before I call him up. I see Dr. Hooker has come back in. Let's see if her sound is a little bit better now. Dr. Nima Hooker, let's see if her sound is better, because you both have presented, I asked her about risk and you explained. What I'd like to do now is just show a couple of slides that ask that question a little deeper. So this was what the Attorney General here in New York said this week. She said the science is clear. The vaccine saves lives.
Cannot see the screen.
Okay. Thank you for telling me so quickly, because it's bad when you're just going along. Don't. What about now? Can you see the screen now? Can you see the slides now?
Yes.
Okay,
You
great.
see it, Letitia James, we see.
Okay, so now I'll go back to the beginning. All right, so. Okay, so she said it saves lives, the science is clear. And I was like wondering how she knew this when the science is not clear to so many physicians. So these are some of the things that you can see at CDC. This is the extent of the information. This shows you how much more risk you acquire with age, how much more risk you have for getting it, how much more risk you have for hospitalization, how much more risk you have for death. So the person in my age group, I'm 73, they say that I got 1,100 times, 1,100 more chance and more risk with this. And the things they tell me to do are wear these masks and do these things. Now, Dr. Gorman, you addressed the question, why have so little time for testing or make a vaccine with a less tested method? That question still stands. The fact that they were examining and investigating mRNA technology in vaccines does not replace testing, animal testing for particular technique. Animal testing has been done with the killed viruses, for a long time. But why use this experimental technique when you haven't done the animal studies or anything? My next question is, if the harmless protein from the virus can be made by me from an externally injected mRNA, a complex molecule, a much more complex process, why not just give me the harmless protein? If my body can create antibodies to it, that's the purpose. Why make my body do it? I don't understand. And then I want to know, is it true that France, Germany, Netherlands, and Ireland have currently suspended administration of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 virus, and why, if you're aware? And are the statistics on post-vaccination death in elderly people, are those statistics accurate? I went to the CDC. So now this is a screen. I'll tell you why I put this screen up. This screen, these are recalled drugs. And these are the years they were recalled. If you look at the year that they started, most of them are drugs that have been used for a long time. Some of these have just been stopped in some countries, some have been stopped worldwide. This is disease. Just to let you know, there's 17 pages of these things in between that. So I'm talking about 19 pages of medications that initially were thought to be safe and ultimately were recalled by one or more countries because of the harmful effects. Now, if it takes years for these things to be discovered, I don't see how you can assess risk unless you feel you're in a very risky situation. You know, if somebody has a gun that's about to shoot you, unless you take the virus, well, you know that the risk from the gun shooting is got to be worse than somebody giving you a vaccination. So that risk you can kind of assess. When you're talking about morbidity and mortality associated with medications that have not been fully investigated, that's a different situation. So here I asked a question about thyroidazine. This is something in my profession, in psychiatry. You can also use it in a certain type of infection. But the bottom line is that it was with us since the 50s, and it wasn't withdrawn worldwide until 2005. And you have to understand if it's withdrawn, it's because it had some pretty severe side effects, which are these arrhythmias or heart arrhythmias that can kill you. This is thalidomide. I asked a question about that. First marketed in 1957. The screen is in the way here. Oh, good, I can move it. All right, so where it was available over the counter. And at the time of the drug's development, scientists did not believe any drug taken by a pregnant woman could pass across the placental barrier. They didn't even know it could do that. This one let them know that it could. And soon there appeared all sorts of abnormalities. I have one of the children in the screen on the left here, being born to mothers using thalidomide. In late 1959, it was noticed that a peripheral neuritis developed in patients who took the drug over a period of time. And it was only after this point that thalidomide ceased to be provided over the counter. It was recalled in Germany in 61, so that's 2 years later. And despite all of that, it was sold in pharmacies in Canada until 1962. The whole thrust of this is just the same question over and over. Now, this is not, let's just go over some of you might say those are medications, those aren't vaccines. We know vaccines a whole lot better. Okay, so let's look at the history of the vaccines. Now, where did I get this?
I will. Bye, sweetie. Love you. Have a great day.
Please mute yourself.
Also, I'll send you details about the gym, please.
Okay, please mute yourself.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop to find this person. And
All right. Have a good one.
please mute yourself.
Juan Romeo. Mute yourself.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. So go back with the slides. All right. So this isn't Dr. McIntosh saying this. This is the journal right here. This is the journal of the Royal Journal of the Society of Medicine. That would be from England. And this has to do with something called the Cutter incident. That's in 1955. Some batches of polio vaccine contain live polio virus, even though they had passed required safety tests. Now, that can't happen with this vaccine, but the point is still the same, which is that mishaps do occur with vaccines as well as with medicines. And it resulted in over 200,000 children receiving it, and maybe 200 children having various degrees of paralysis, and 10 children dying and 40,000 cases of polio. And we had the simian virus, 40. I spoke of that before being a contaminant in the, let's see, which virus was it? Polio vaccine. And this is from the Journal of Clinical Oncology. And by the way, all of these I got from the CDC. These references are from the CDC itself, which is supposed to be, and they scare me more than the so-called conspiracy theories, right? Gotta go to the next one. This was the swine flu vaccine. I spoke of this before, the Guillain-Barré syndrome, where 40 million people were vaccinated, but maybe 500 people came down with something called Guillain-Barré.
Wow.
All right, so, however.
We're gonna flush his face really well and then let.
Oh man. Please mute yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, but just flush it really, really well.
Jamal McLeod, Jamal, mute yourself.
Jamal McLeod, mute yourself.
Okay, although people were talking about this as early as the 80s, it wasn't until 2003 that they finally concluded that people who received the swine flu influenza vaccine had an increased risk for developing Guillain-Barré syndrome. Notice the icon here is from the Centers for Disease Control, and this is, you know, so that's supposed to be the end-all be-all of resources for us. So let me just, and here, this is a rotavirus vaccine and intussusception. Intussusception is where your bowel kind of, I mean, I got a gastroenterologist, so I'm not going to try to explain what it is, but here's a picture of it. And in 1988, the FDA approved the rotoshield virus, but infants developed intussusception. At first, it was not clear if the vaccine or some other factor was causing the bowel obstructions, but by 1999, the manufacturer voluntarily withdrew this. Okay, here's another rotavirus vaccine, and they've discovered that porcine circle virus, PCV, is a common virus found in pigs. In 2010, it was discovered that both rotavirus vaccines licensed in the United States, that's Rotatec, and PCV type 1, PCV1, is not known to cause disease in animals or humans. That virus isn't known to cause it. However, in fact, PCV is common in healthy pigs. So here's what they tell us. They say, so in other words, you're getting pig viruses in this vaccine, and this is what your scientists tell you. They say safety monitoring of both vaccines has not shown any reason for concern about PCV. And here we have these two pigs over here telling you, ain't that good news? All right, I'm going to stop the screen share. And I'm going to go back and see if Dr. Hooker, if her sound is better now. Dr. Hooker, can you unmute yourself and speak?
Yes, is that better?
We can hear you. So you can take up where you were before in terms of the questions. The main questions are, how do you deal with risk? How do you deal with risk in this shorter period of time? And how can you, as a young woman in childbearing age, not remember that it was a delay before people found out that some medicines have teratogenicity, that they can cause tumors and or cause cancers, and sometimes can cause problems in your unborn children.
Yeah. Echoing on your end?
We heard you that time.
Okay. So,
He's echoing.
trying to think.
Okay, we hear you.
Did the echo stop? Are you guys hearing me okay?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So I was actually listening to this podcast recently about how our brains assess risk, because there's risk in everything we do on a daily basis. And when there are things that you're used to doing, you ignore the risk over time. So every time we get in our car and drive, there's a risk of not making it to your destination. So as you're saying, some people are higher risk, as myself working in healthcare, and I had to think about that in terms of if I'm exposed, I have a higher risk of being exposed to the population that I work with. So I guess that's kind of how I think of it, is there's risk in everything we do. And I don't know how deep to go, but in this country, we don't have a lot of control over things anyway. We don't control our food that we produce. There are other people growing that. We don't know what's going into that process, and we take the risk of eating that. We eat fast foods on the go. We don't know what's going into that, GMO. So there's a lot of risk that we accept on a daily basis for convenience. And so an understanding that, for one, there are certain viruses that use the same process as this vaccine, which hijack your own immune system, your cells, insert the mRNA or DNA, and use your cells to process it in the same way that this vaccine works. So this is not a process that your body's not used to, because it's faced viruses like this previously. So, and how the immune system works, yes, it's going to use your body to make these proteins to have your immune system react, but then those proteins in the mRNA gets degraded and is destroyed. So it's not something that's lingering on, as you don't get adenovirus or other viruses that do the same thing, and you just keep having adenovirus forever. Your body is, smart enough to take on these and, get rid of it and move forward. So that's kind of how I thought of it, is there's risk in a lot of there's risk in natural infections. Of course, COVID-19 has its own risk. So you have to think, what risk am I willing to take? And just to be sure, this vaccine is not FDA approved. It's only approved for emergency use. So they're not forcing anybody to get this. It's not mandatory. It's not mandatory for workers. It is something that you kind of have to assess on your own. Is it worth me having a silent infection, and, coming home or seeing family members and giving it to them, which we've heard time and time again for different people, having that happen and, losing family members, versus doing something that's probably less risky than other things that I'm doing that day in order to protect myself. So that's kind of how I guess, thought about it.
Excellent answer, Dr. Hook. I think you answered questions for a lot of people here who, your decision-making process is what I think was so great and so interesting. Even those of us who come up with a different decision, at least we know you thought about it. It's not something you just jumped into and did with no information. And I'm glad to hear that. So now that brings us to our next speaker, who I might suspect probably didn't get vaccinated, but I don't know for sure. Dr. Kakai, are you with us?
I guess I'm unmuted right now, right?
Yes, sir.
Am I clear?
Very clear.
Well, let me first thank you for having me on. I think this is my first time really being a part of this. And I want to acknowledge first, as somebody that's been in practice in private practice for 36 years, and I've been practicing Chinese medicine and homeopathy longer than I've been a licensed physician. I'm currently president of the New York State Homeopathic Medical Society, and I recently retired from the New York State Acupuncture Board. But let me say, for physicians that are on the front line, when you're put in these situations and you really, for months, all you've been able to do is tell people to distance themselves, wash your hands, right? And you see people dying. I can only imagine the pressure then to really just push the vaccine when it's being offered by people in authority, people that, you know, are in public health, people that you've been trained to trust, right? That you would recommend that and that you would do that for yourself, right? So fortunately or unfortunately for me, I've both been on the inside as a Yale trained physician going into family practice, but I've also had a lot of different inputs from a variety of, you know, different directions. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. During the HIV epidemic, we were keeping people alive with nutrients for intravenous vitamin C drips. But when the protease inhibitors came along and I saw how well they worked, I gladly told patients, you know, look, you need to do that because I saw that it made a difference. So what happened is that when I saw this epidemic starting, and I hadn't really looked into it too hard at the beginning. MERS back in 2003 in Saudi Arabia, that was really a deadly virus in terms of the way that, you know, it affected people. So the idea that something was going to come back, you know, at some point to really bite us, that was already there. And the truth is that the CDC, Fauci, and there's another doctor in Dr. Barr in North Carolina, they had been researching vaccines for HIV going all the way back, right? And they were involved in creating chimeric viruses. And chimeric viruses are viruses where you're actually combining the virus as it appears in different animals to create a different effect. Meaning they were doing something called gain of function research, right? To actually see, well, if the virus were to mutate, what could actually happen? What would we do with it? So in 2014, and there was a lot of pushback on that, right? But in 2014, they actually created this version of the spike protein that was capable of getting into lung epithelial cells. I'm not saying that's the virus that's out there now, but I'm saying when that research got too hot here, right, that research was moved to Wuhan, right? Wuhan and other labs had already had outbreaks of different things that were checked, right? So I don't know if that was the best decision, but that funding continued under the Alliance for Eco Health, or the Eco Health Alliance. And I actually fact checked that. So we continue to fund that. And it's just recently that the former CDC chief Redfield came out basically saying that this virus probably came from a lab in China, because we know it wasn't a wet market, right? So the point is, you can believe or you cannot believe that, but there's a real paper trail. It's all there, right? So the piece around vaccines, that decision to go in this direction was already something in place years ago, years before this actually happened. That research was going on. And one of the difficulties that we've had is that so much money was put into that area, right? And just promises made, contracts and everything, that we committed ourselves to doing that kind of vaccine therapy, right? Now, this in fight, it's not like there are other things. Like in 2005, hydroxychloroquine had already been pigeonholed as a medication that would really help the next coronavirus, right? So, I mean, people, you know, were actually thinking about this, but there's several things that happened. One, we have to understand that the whole vaccine program in general was going to fold up because of all the lawsuits. You know, we mentioned the West Nile virus. I mean, it was like billions of dollars. In fact, because the US has assumed responsibility for paying for people that have had vaccine injury, we're talking about $4 billion has actually been spent. You know, and we talk about the experimentation, right? As late as 1996, Thatcher, I guess it was in the Surgeon Journal, had to apologize to the Black and brown communities in Los Angeles because an experimental vaccine that they were using in Haiti, right? They decided to use in Los Angeles, and they didn't let the people know until 6 years later. So that apology was made. So moving along with that, understanding the nature then of this capitalism and the economy, the first thing as we moved into the whole COVID-19 season, all of a sudden I saw all of this condemnation of hydroxychloroquine, right? I saw doctors being attacked personally. I saw data being falsified in major medical journals, right? And studies being conducted with levels of hydroxychloroquine that were toxic. And even though the information was later debunked and removed, the media still quoted that. The media were waiting for the vaccine, waiting for the vaccine. Everything was moving in this direction. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Because I've been around long enough to know when something don't smell right. And that wasn't working. I was already clear, like, okay, so here we are, there's a concern about immune system. And unfortunately, medical doctors, we're not trained in nutrition. You know, we spend, you know, maybe we're talking about coenzymes and cofactors. So we'll talk about vitamin D3. We'll talk about vitamin C. But then we go right into drugs. Everything is about the drugs, right? So as I see it from a pharmaceutical, and this is just from a money standpoint, to move now from drugs to vaccines where you're indemnified, that's a whole nother level of profit. You know, as Dr. McIntosh, and as I've seen in my own career, drugs just being pulled off the shelf just constantly after they've been used. So I had to look at all that and try to figure out, okay, what's going on? We're waiting for the vaccine. I had reported on ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine back in June. I had done webinars. I'm like, well, wait a second, you're getting reports from around the world. But then we hear, well, the research isn't up to snuff. So now to actually do these double-blind randomized controlled studies, you have to have money like who? Like a pharmaceutical company, right? Or like the NIH. And then when you look at the relationship between the FDA, the NIH, and the pharmaceutical company, you're like, well, what the heck? Where does a level of objectivity come in? Why are we following a path that we haven't been able to make a vaccine to HIV? You look at the failure of the flu virus, you know, when the actual percentage is actually covered. You look at even there were some mRNA vaccines that were used in respiratory syncytial virus. There were deaths that were associated with that. AstraZeneca, when they were asked about participating in making the vaccine, they said, well, we need to have indemnity. Why? Because they said, what if in 4 years we find out that this vaccine is actually causing these other problems? What then, right? So people are looking at very short term, you know, but these aren't vaccines. And, you know, I do like this because I shouldn't even be using that word. This is a whole different type of genetic manipulation. You know, this is a whole different type of like antibody production that follows. And the question is, then how does that actually affect your immune system? So my first issue of concern was, where is the informed consent, right? If I could share my screen, I can actually just bring up one little thing. Now I can't share my screen, but if that were possible, I would show you. I'll just tell you then, right? So a lot of attention has been focused.
Excuse me, Dr. Sakai, you can share your screen. Let me
oh, okay.
change the permissions here.
Right.
Okay, so you should be able to do it now.
Let me see if I can just find this. I am not good with technology, as those of you who know me know, but why isn't that coming up?
Put your cursor on the bottom of your screen. There should be a green box that says share screen.
Well, no, I hit that, but now I'm trying to pull up the article that I want to show. Well, this is one of them.
Oh, there you go.
Antibody, and I can hit, yeah, you can see that, right?
Yes, sir.
And I wish I could just roll it up. Oh, okay. Antibody dependent enhancement of SARS and vaccine therapies. So this is one of the potential ways that the vaccine can do damage to people. It's almost like you're being primed. Like, remember when you were younger, you got exposed, you got allergic to penicillin, make sure you tell the next doctor that. Why? Because they're concerned that with a prime response, you know, it's going to be that much greater. So that's a whole area that, you know, there's a lot of articles and information about that. But for me, that's part of informed consent, because we're talking about, well, what happens next year when coronavirus comes? Are we talking about a whole nother set of vaccines? Is that the route we want to commit ourselves to? And then what are the possible implications and complications from you having had a vaccine? Moreover, what if there's a cross-reactivity between the human coronavirus? Remember, and again, I shouldn't use vaccine. This is something that's being injected into your body, whether we're talking about adenovirus or we're talking about mRNA, right? Where your body is generating these proteins, the spike protein, that then you're going to make an antibody to. So that was like, okay, that antibody cross-reacts with other tissue. So I recently, I have a radio broadcast and I interviewed someone where he deals with a lot of pregnant women, and he talked about how just from COVID-19 alone, it was affecting their autonomic nervous system. So they were tachycardic, their heart was racing all the time. But he found that that response has even increased, you know, since they got the vaccine, in terms of just dealing with referrals and trying to figure that out. So I'm going to stop share. And that's just, those are just a couple of things that really come to mind just in that respect. So the other issue is, what's very common for me is you have one person in a household that gets COVID-19, and the other person close around them, they don't get it. Right now, this is the novel coronavirus, which means they don't have antibodies to that. But what we all have is innate immunity. And guess who gets and this now where the nutrition piece comes in, because guess who has some of the weakest innate immunity in this country? It's people of color. Why? Because the single most important nutrient to really boost your innate immunity is vitamin D3. And there have been any number of studies to show that vitamin D3 decreases the death rate when you go into the hospital, decreases the chance that you'll end up on a ventilator, all of that information. So my other question was, what you are so concerned about Black and brown people.
All right, brother, you with family.
Take your time, brother. We're all feeling it.
Come on, Baba. Come on, Baba. Come on.
All right.
Let him take a minute.
If you are so concerned about the health of Black and brown people, right? Why don't you distribute vitamin D3? There's an epidemic.
Yes.
You haven't, we've been, you know, you're shut in. You have Black and brown skin that protects you from the sunlight. You know, older people's innate immunity gets weaker, right? The diseases that we suffer from, it weakens the innate immunity. It's so freaking obvious, you know, in terms of what needs to be done to minimize what? Infection. It's susceptibility. SARS-CoV-1 was a killer. This virus is not really a killer. The survival rate is like 98% and stuff, right? But people are dying because it's so infective. So many people have got infected by this virus, right? So even when you get the vaccine, what they still tell you to do, right? It's like you still got to mask up. Why? You can still get the virus. You can still pass it on to other people. And let's talk about the variants, right? First of all, everything in this creation, right, wants to live. Viruses in regular medicine, if you want to use this kind of Western European logic, I'm sorry, you're going to kill yourself, right? Because in this kind of mindset, viruses aren't alive. But even the darn cell, when it's invaded by the virus, will switch to aerobic glycolysis to try to live and will do everything possible to live. Viruses want to live too. You look at your body and you have the illusion that this is a human body. You got 10 times more viruses, more than 10 times bacteria in a healthy human body than you have human cells. This whole thing where we got to keep killing something and stuff, this is a life energy that is flowing through all of us that keeps everything working. So yes, the virus, if you want to maintain a proper balance, right, we have to deal with our nutrition, which is piss poor. Now think about this further, right? If you're not going to emphasize that, but yet you're going to give people an artificial infection, right? Who do you think is more likely you're going to have side effects? It's the people that have weakened innate immunity. And then, so for me, this was informed consent, but then I heard the work of a vaccine maker, Dr. Bosch. Dr. Bosch is saying, look, here we are. First of all, this whole thing was under the guise of herd immunity, right? But you're really making it that there are two major fractions of the virus, the nucleocapsid, the protein, and the spike protein, where you can make antibodies too, right? So if you get a vaccine, the problem is the vaccine, then the antibodies that come up actually outperform your own immune system and actually can have a suppressive effect on your innate immunity, coming into play. I think what's unusual about this virus, because usually you think innate immunity, like, hey, I'm I'm immune now. But people have those antibodies wear off. They wear off. And what I would say is that they're different strains of the virus. Now, if you're vaccinated to a virus that has a particular spike protein, right? These nucleotides that the spike protein is, that your antibodies are reacting to. But guess what? You get another variant where that nucleotide thing has changed. So then it's a little bit different, because you're no longer that immune, even though you've had the vaccine. This is where you're going to start talking about booster vaccines. And each year, there's going to be more and more vaccines. That's only one line of therapy. But here's the big problem. You can look up any natural sources from nitric oxide, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I could run down a list of maybe 15, 20 herbs that in medical studies have been shown to be useful against coronavirus. You're not going to hear about that because there's no money there. There's no money to go in that particular direction, right? Even the ivermectin is the cheap parasitic drug that all of a sudden it's found as active against filariasis, dengue fever. All these different viruses can be treated by ivermectin, right? And now, so I'm looking up, FDA is warning about ivermectin. It's also used to treat heartworms in animals and stuff. I've used ivermectin repeatedly. So as somebody trained in homeopathy and Chinese medicine, I usually lead with those things. But because most people don't have access to that kind of care, right? And because mainstream doctors can actually prescribe ivermectin, I said, well, this is a win-win from everybody. But do you hear about ivermectin being talked about? I would recommend COVID-19criticalcare.com. You know, if you wanted just to get non-CDC doctors, but yet a very academic, have written like over 2,000 peer-reviewed journal papers and stuff, right? The NIH couldn't ignore them. So NIH said, okay, doctors can prescribe this. And you know what? They're going to figure out ways to come back at that like they did at hydroxychloroquine. Africa, which is supposed to be decimated by COVID-19, maybe they've been blessed by the sunlight and the fact that people take hydroxychloroquine in malarial countries every week. So what's happened for me is that I can no longer trust the medical literature because now I know who's controlling it. In the same way that you see all the pharmaceutical advertisements with drugs that you wouldn't want to have to take if you were near death in terms of the advertising. But now I'm looking at the medical literature. So they did a study with vitamin D3 saying that it wasn't effective for COVID patients coming into the hospital. Now, the usual dose that I'll recommend, unless you have a particular problem, is about 5,000 IUs a day. For these hospital admitted patients, they gave them 200,000 IUs injections. I mean, even mainstream docs, they looked at this and said, well, this is crazy. What are you trying to kill the people and stuff? Because we know that nutrients, like everything else, they have a range, right? You heard about intravenous vitamin C. It's been used for years for sepsis in other countries and stuff. Dr. Clinton here in the 50s, they used for all kind of antiviral protocols. So part of it is doctors are really pigeonholed into just using mainstream medicine as it is. There's no research on alternatives and the value of nutrients and botanicals, right? But anybody, you know, if your background from the islands, wherever, you know how effective that can be. And so the question is, what is the real agenda? And I'm not going to try to get into that because we're really talking about vaccines and stuff, right? So when I look at the potential risk, so who should take a vaccine, right? And because one, you can't judge from short-term effects because they aren't vaccines. This is immune manipulation therapy. This is gene therapy, right? So it's not really a vaccine, right? You got to wait over time. You got to wait for the next season of coronavirus. You have to see how autoimmune diseases are going to manifest. And I can tell you from being on the end where parents bring their kids to me and people come to me that they've been damaged by vaccines, you're not going to get all the data. So I haven't tried to go through theirs myself, the vaccine, you know, the reaction thing. I haven't tried to go through that site, but people that have looked at it, you've had thousands of reactions, up to about 16,000. You've had many people that have died and are seriously ill. And I haven't, I mean, it's just out there. So the trust factor, are you kidding? The trust factor in a money-driven economy and stuff that ignores simple things, that won't give people the simple information, that it would induce fear, constant fear. You know, I can't trust that, and neither should you. So yes, make informed consent, but it used to be me, it was informed consent. But if it's true that the vaccine and somehow that weakens your immune system, and I've seen that in a few places, but I'm trying to talk to biochemists that I know to actually verify the science behind that relative to the competitive almost inhibition within the immune system if antibodies are responding, and what happens to your own innate immunity. And then there's the question, the real key is not getting COVID. That's the real key, because survival is about 98%, but the key is not getting it. And that really comes through taking botanicals and nutrients and all these things that are in the medical literature that haven't been fully vetted by randomized double-blind controlled trials, because there's really no money for that. I'm gonna stop. I think I answered a few questions, I hope.
Yes,
But
you
anyway.
did, Dr. Kakai. And you're going to come back because I'm going to have you come back. I have one person that has to leave by 4, and that's Dr. Shadidi Kinsey. We're going to come back to you and to Dr. Hooker and to Dr. Gorman and, have some more conversation. In fact, I'd like to put all of you together where you have like a conversation, as opposed to like just one person speaking at a time, where you can ask each other questions. But right now, I want to bring on a sister who is a great community activist and a certified acupuncturist. Please welcome to the microphone, Dr. Shadidi Kinsey. Shadidi B. Kinsey. Shadidi, are you there?
Habarigani
And Jema Asante, Habarigani.
and Jama. Yes. Santi Sana Simotap. And Dr. McIntosh and Sister Betty Dobson for constantly uplifting our people by educating us with these forums and keeping us active and on point, and your undying love for Black people and our liberation and a higher level of human life. Yes, I'm Shadidi Mama Dr. B. Chase Kinsey, and I'm the executive director of Peace Health Center, the family and friends of Dr. Muntulu Shakur, and the vice chair of NACO New York, the National Association of Kyrita Organization. Our national chair is Dr. Maulana Karenga. Yes, and so since 1990, Peace Health Center has put the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles, into practice. And this ties in with the keeping with today's forum on the optimal Black health care during COVID-19. So before COVID and during COVID, we incorporate the principles and bringing them into practice. Today, I'd like to highlight 4 principles of bringing optimal Black health care during COVID-19. And those principles are, the first one would be Ujima, for collective work and responsibility in the time of this pandemic and resistance, to bring healthcare to our people, because we are really being hit very hard, and to have who have suffered the injustice of the healthcare system pre-COVID-19. The Congressional Black Caucus Research Foundation in 2003's report of the 15 leading causes of death in the United States, African Americans led in 11 categories. And then the response for our people's needs was the closing of more hospitals in our community. And we're already medically underserved, leaving us more susceptible to COVID-19 with these pre-existing conditions. And now with COVID, it has skyrocketed. Next to per capita Native Americans, we've had the largest loss of life here. And again, with Ujima, with Peace Health Center, giving complementary health care as opposed to alternative, because we need all of it. And then some. We need the medical, we need the complementary, the acupuncture, the herbs, all of it, all of the above, to address our people's needs. And with this virus, yes, we advise our people to, you know, continue to follow the protocols of wearing the mask and the personal distance and then washing and sanitizing our hand and getting tested. Getting tested is paramount. We are under tested within our community for this virus. And it's very important that we become tested, that we get tested. And yes, I am for having the vaccine. I haven't, I will take the vaccine in April.
Dr. Shadidi. Shadidi, you're muted. Shadidi, you're muted. You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
How did that happen?
It happened because I'm muting everyone and you came in under a different name. I didn't know that was you.
Oh, I see. That's Patrice, it's our granddaughters. All right, Dr. McIntosh, watch this out, child of Alegba. All right. Again, I was afflicted with COVID-19 here in back in November. And that's why I highlight the importance of testing, because I was tested every week for 6 weeks because in visiting my loved one who that's in a nursing home, so you have to have the COVID negative test. And I was tested every week, and in 1 week span, I came up positive. So the importance of the testing, and then, you know, going into isolation and all, but post and my symptoms were mild. They were by my primary care doctor, Dr. Moore, being that I didn't have coughing or fever, and you know, it was that protocol of the vitamin D3, the zinc, cod liver oil, a vitamin C, and then I took, the elderberry was wonderful, and other supplements, and the recuperation, but it's still the effects that linger with the fatigue and some others, you know, and this was mild. Me coming down with COVID, it was mild. So I can only put myself into the brothers and sisters and the people that have come down with severe symptoms, such as our prisoners of war, and those of the inmates and folks living in, because we've lost so many people in prisons and the shelters within our family, family members that lived in shelters and passed from COVID and all, and don't have the you know, access to the right kind of diet and all. So again, with the vaccination, yes, because I go with the educational part, and that was with president of Morehouse College Medical School and Howard University Medical School, Meharry Medical School, the National Medical Association, and that's primarily that's the Black Doctors and blackdoctors.org, and the Urban League, that the safety and effectiveness, because many of the medical schools were part of the trials that involve COVID. So yes, I go with their recommendation for this virus, because we are being, and as I said, I am going to take the vaccine. My primary advised me to because being that I had to test for the antibodies in December and they were still there, and he said it's 6 to 9 months that they would be effective, that he advised me to wait to at least 6 months if I was going to take the vaccine, and I will. Again, here at peace with Ujima for our collective work and responsibility. And then, okay, so that's what we do with our patients, to advise them to the first line of defense is enhancing the immune system, and to have rest, and nutrition is paramount. Nutrition is paramount. And many of us live in food deserts. So just to make the statement across the board, like we all have access to that, we don't. And so eat balanced meals, the vegetables and the lean protein, the meat, the fish, and all. And if you can't get fresh, frozen. Fresh is best, but next is frozen. And to reduce the stress. Stress reduction is very, very important because it injures the immune system. We learned that with Chinese medicine. And to put into action, stop worrying about things and become involved. Take it to the streets. Put into action. Don't worry, get busy, so advising our patients of the supplements, again, the vitamin D, the vitamin C, and all, and to do that. And Nia, our purpose, our collective vocation, the building and development of our community in order to restore our people to their traditional greatness. Answering the call as healers to bring balance and health, to rid the disharmonies of the improper diets, the effects of exposure to toxins, which have a big effect with this pandemic, because we live in toxic zones as African people here in America, from the Cancer Alley, from New Orleans to the Asthma Trail here in New York City. The emotional distress, the fear and the anxiety, how that attacks educating our people as to what's going on. When I find these disharmonies and where they are arising from, to let them know how the emotions are playing such a part of their well-being, because the fear and the anxiety attack the kidneys, the anger and the depression injures the liver, the worry, the isolation injure the stomach, the grief, all that grief that we're going through now, that we have been through in this past year, the amount of lives that have joined the ancestors, and they're not being able to be with one another at their homegoing services. That limitation. So the grief, yes, and that attacks the lung. And so how these emotions and to making through the educational process of healing, to let them know what it is doing. And then for those who have had the post-COVID syndrome with the fatigue, the depression, the anxiety, the fear, the muscle aches, the memory, it's affecting them. And so with the acupuncture and the other complementary services that we provide with the herbology, with the naturopathic doctor, we can bring about harmony to our folks who need it the most. And then Kuumba for creativity, from ancient Kemet, the principle of Suruj Ta. We as injured physicians, healing ourselves and our people. Suruj Ta, that says that we are repairing that which is damaged, to restore that which is in disrepair. replenish the depleted, strengthening the weak, giving a ladder to those stuck in the pit of despair. And in this time of the pandemic, our people are suffering psychologically, emotionally. The people that I see with the, and how they have other disharmonies, but how this depression and fear is off the chain. It's off the chain. So we as physicians, as healers, as activists, I'm an activist healer, are morally obligated to bring them that ladder with they stuck in this despair. Any Imani faith, our principle of faith. You know, Maulana in creating the Nguzu Saba, he begins with Umoja, that's for unity. That brings us together. But faith, our faith sustains us and inspires us. Our coming together at Peace Health Center, building the relationships with our patients, relationships, the patient practitioner relationship, having them being partners in their well-being, in the balancing, in the healing process. As I said, with the emotion, what the emotions are doing to their well-being, and with the food and the nutrition and all, but having them as partners, we're doing this together, you know. My spiritual guide, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, taught us the greatest faith is in the Creator. But great also is faith in ourselves. Without faith, nothing is possible. With it, nothing is impossible. So we must keep the faith, you know, and don't get weary. Children, don't you get weary, because I'm no ways tired. Kaiweed has brought me so far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy, but Obatala did not bring me this far to leave me. And the Reverend Dr. Adam Clayton Powell's spirit advises we keep the faith, baby. Faith in our Creator, faith in ourselves, faith in our mothers, our fathers, our sisters, our brothers, our future, our children, our elders. Faith in all that makes us beautiful and strong, and faith that through hard work, long struggle, and a whole lot of love and understanding, we will again step back on the stage of human history as a free, proud, and productive people. Harambe.
Harambe. Thank you so much, Sister Dr. Shadidi Kinsey. All right, so listen, what we'd like to do now at 4 is to have our scientists come together for a conversation. I'd like for Dr. Nima Hooker, Dr. Gallman, Burnett Gallman, Dr. Kamal Kakai, Dr. Shadidi B. Kinsey, I'd like for you all to unmute yourselves, and if you have questions for each other about your presentations, to ask those questions. No one else except for those people that I just named, the 4 people that I just named. I see Dr. Gallman.
Lisa May, Dr. McIntosh?
Yeah, yes.
Dr. McIntosh, you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Because I have
Right, you have to, that's okay. So we'll just let the other 3 physicians. Thank you so much, Dr. Shadidi B. Kinsey. Have a good program. All right, peace and blessings. All right. Okay, so do you need me to ask a question to start you off, or can you all start off on your own? What did you think? So, Doctor,
asking, what is it?
One question that was there was one question, Dr. Kamal Kakai. I mean,
this
it was
doctor
just like no one had to ask me.
Started breaking down crying because of their.
Wait a second.
Janice,
People don't know.
mute,
Hey,
Janice,
quiet.
mute.
Oh, sorry.
All right. So, the question was, we asked each of the people, who has gotten the vaccine or is planning to get the vaccine. I haven't gotten it. I'm not planning to get it, unless I'm forced to or by some reason. Where are you on this, Dr. Kakai?
No, someone said they asked, but Dr. Kakai didn't answer the question. I think that would be kind
I
of
didn't ask it because
hypocritical.
I had to answer.
No. I have no intentions of getting the vaccine. And
Yeah.
those of you who know me, my practice is bi-coastal. So, everyone keeps saying, oh, they're going to make it mandatory. But you know what? Right now, I'm just trying to stay in the present. Right. And the present says to educate as many people as possible, so that people can have informed consent and realize that they're participating in a clinical trial. We're all participating in this clinical trial. And if you're all right with that, God bless you, but you just have to know that. You have to know that. And let me say one other thing. At one point you had people coming out saying that COVID is not real, but it is very real. People are dying. I think there are a number of false positive tests, because if you look at studies that have come out that showed you had death rate going down in cancer and heart disease last year, because a lot of that got transferred into a COVID 19 diagnosis. But yet, the fact that the real issue is our immunity, right? And one other thing I would add here is that different cultures have different cultural technologies. So Western cultural technologies is very biochemically, very materially oriented. Asian cultural technology, right, is all about the chi. It's all about the energy, right? And herbs and nutrition are understood in that energetic pattern. And as someone that's looked into traditional African medicine, it's about consciousness, right? It's about your state of mind. It's about what things and thoughts that you are willing to entertain and that are a part of you. So for me, meditation, right? Meditation, prayer are all essential things that actually strengthen your energy field. I would love to come together to ritualize, to talk to the virus and say, because most viruses, they check out and they no longer become a problem. Why? Because they want to live too. And it doesn't help them to kill their host. But we keep putting pressure on the virus to mutate, right? The virus wants to live. So if it got to jump your ship, it's going to find somebody else. It's just a different way to look at it, and it's informed by different cultural systems.
I certainly appreciate Dr. Kokaye's information, and I respect it. I actually have learned a lot, and I appreciate the insight. One of the things he pointed out, I think I'd like to amplify, and that is the fact of informed consent, and the key being informed. And that is dealing with information from a perspective of knowledge rather than hearsay. I alluded earlier to the fact of they say, and one of the areas that I'm looking at now is the fact that there's a relatively new science called agnotology, which is the science of induced ignorance, and the mechanisms of that, and the types of that. And I think that is very interesting that that a lot of that, in my observation, a lot of that has been in operation during this past year. And so I would, as Dr. Kokaye has done, I would caution everyone to, it's better to know than to believe. And I've gotten into a lot of arguments with this information, but it's better to know than to believe, because if you believe first, you end up believing in foolishness. And so knowing what you know enables you to be able to give informed consent.
All right.
I'd like for our three scientists here to respond to the statement by the Attorney General. She says, Facebook and Twitter must take immediate action to protect New Yorkers and limit any further loss of life as a result of the spread of inaccurate information.
Well, it's funny because New York Governor Cuomo, they were actually taken to task. I forget the name of the legal team, by actually posting information saying that the vaccine is safe to do. That, at this point, it's clear that it's actually safe to do. They were taking the task on that. So, I think what happens when because we're dealing with something that's experimental, right? I'm getting distracted by there's another voice.
There's somebody, but I can't locate it. Okay.
I think it's Betty.
Oh, okay.
Background noise.
Okay. So because this is experimental, and what's happened is when I look at research like at ivermectin, and it's, in part, they don't want to vet it because a lot of the studies are done outside of this country, which is really interesting to me because you look at places like India where studies have been done even using it prophylactically, and you realize, well, almost 10% of this country's physicians are from India or of Indian origin, but yet we don't want to trust the studies that are being done in other institutions around the world. So when you look at all of the studies being done around the world, it's like a corpus of information that you just can't ignore because there's so much that's there, So the point is that we really have to find other therapies beside vaccines because we're going to be forever in the pocket of vaccine makers and stuff, that are going to keep in, and then there'll be the scare. It is a level of scare, and then there's the vaccine passports. It's a level of scare and control, and it's not necessary. Some folks, in certain quarters might want us to go in that direction. It's just not necessary. There are other medications and things that can be used.
I see a question in the chat referring to the flu. And it's very interesting because my research, well, first of all, the prevention that we have embarked upon actually also protects against flu. The hand washing, the mask, and all those things. But at the same time, I read something, and maybe Dr. Kokai can enlarge on this, that said that there's some type of phenomena in which viruses can impact each other by decreasing the incidence of one with the presence of another. I'm not thoroughly familiar with that. Have you heard that, Dr. Kokai?
I haven't heard that, but what I wanted to emphasize here is that your innate immune system has to be exercised, right? It has to be exercised, just like a muscle, your mind, your immune system has to be exercised. So when we so totally cut ourselves off in isolation and constantly cleaning all the bacteria and viruses off our hands, when we constantly doing that, we're literally weakening our immune system. So in terms of the competitive inhibition between viruses, I have to think on that one. I haven't seen that like directly, that, so yeah, it's interesting that the flu virus decreased, but let's face it, a whole lot of other diseases decreased because everything was being diagnosed as COVID. So I don't know how to read it.
Okay, I would like to just take a slight commercial break for 1 second. Brothers and sisters, I tried to explain in the beginning of the forum that CMOTAP is a not-for-profit organization. We take no government funds, no anything, but Iyikwe Amma said, all of life is twin. Let he who would cast the spell of death separate the two, giving and receiving. He says, giving and receiving, all of life is twin. Let he who would cast the spell of death separate the two. So, as I told you, CMOTAP's bills come in despite the fact that we can't use our headquarters and have our regular meetings. I'd much rather have the meetings we have where I can see you face to face, you can see us, and you can talk to your speakers personally and that sort of thing. Can't do that right now, so we have to do this Zoom. We need you to donate. What I would like everybody to do is look in your chat. I'm going to paste it one more time. I pasted it several times. The 3 ways that you can donate to CMOTAP. You can do a Cash App at $ Dr. CMOTAP. You can mail to CMOTAP 13505 Rockaway Boulevard, South Ozone Park, New York 11420, or by donating with PayPal or credit card, and the link is there in the chat. If you don't know what the chat is, down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little sign with a box like you have in cartoon characters. It says chat, you click that, and you can read the messages that people are writing to each other. Now, yesterday we had a Zoom. There were, I mean, literally, people were coming up and saying how inspiring it was and so on and so forth. Not one person donated to the Cash App. It's okay. We're not going to, we're going to continue. We're determined to continue, but it's so much easier if we can get that reciprocity. So we have over 100 people. We have 110 participants still with us. Some people have left. We have 110 participants. It's not necessary that everybody gives a lot. A lot of people can give a little. Those of you who have more can give. The 3 ways are posted in the chat. I'd like you, if you're going to give, to please put a pledge down in the chat. Just write, I'm going to give, tell the way you're going to give it. If you're going to give the Cash App, if you're going to give the through the link that I showed you, the PayPal, if you're going to give by sending a check, either one of those. Just put it as your word is good with us. Your word is your bond for us as African people. So that's it. I don't want to interrupt too many times, but I got to go back. I would like to hear people respond to each other's presentations. We have Dr. Gorman, we have Dr. Akai, we have Dr. Hooker. Dr. Hooker, you've been silent. She only promised to stay with me until 4:15.
Yes. I guess I'm just kind of just listening and reflecting. We're talking about the vaccine as prevention and it not being approved yet. So, trying to get my words together, but for the
Excuse me. Mercer, please mute your computer. Mercer, please mute your computer. Thank you.
So the population of people that I help treat and serve are people who, don't exercise on a regular basis. These are people who don't get, 4 to 5 servings of vegetables a day. These are people who are not getting 7-8 hours of sleep at night. They're working, stressful jobs during the day. And I think that those are the basis of what we need in order to have a healthy life, a healthy immune system, all of those things. So I was looking at a study recently saying that American death rate from COVID-19 is much higher than other countries that don't have the obesity rates that we have. Obesity is the #1 risk factor for mortality related to COVID-19. So I find it hard to tell people who are going to still be at risk not to take the vaccine if their risk is so much higher than somebody who actually had the ability to take care of themselves in the proper way. And the other thing is, if these people end up getting COVID-19, are we to, what's the next step for them? Are we saying that we should say do natural treatments at home Or are we still saying that going to the hospital and getting the treatments that they need is the next step? Because there is a medicine being worked on right now to treat severe COVID-19. I think it's supposed to be available this summer. So is it get the vaccine that's new, being studied, not approved, and prevent? Or if you end up getting COVID, going to the hospital, getting these,
what's the
what's,
font on?
I guess what's the balance? Or
What is that font?
I'm not saying, I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but like what is the actual thing
On
that
the table, on the tablecloth?
on a daily basis? Because from my point of view, for people I know don't have the ability to do all the things they need to do for their health as we should, being at risk of getting COVID is much higher than getting
Hopefully
that.
when they call the name.
Let me add something, and maybe I can be of help here. I was trying to get just a number of people that are really savvy. Who is that? Who's on the line? Jeez. Anyway.
Hey yo, please mute your computer. Hey yo, Mercer, please mute your computers.
See, one of the long-standing arguments in the history of Western medicine has been, is it the germ or is it the terrain? And this goes back to French doctor Beauchamp's Pasteur, meaning, is it the germ that's really the issue or is it the terrain, right? So I've been working with this other person, a Kevin Hilton, trying to see if we can initiate a fundraising, a crowd fundraising called Get Right Within, right? And the idea is to switch the focus from the virus to the terrain, because that's exactly what you're talking about, right? And you know, as a clinician, how many people are deficient in vitamin D3 in terms of your population. And anybody that Googles vitamin D3 and COVID-19 will see any number of studies. So I'm like, we cannot rely on, you know, the CDC or, you know, the big pharma outlets, so to speak, to really push an agenda that's about changing the terrain, the landscape, right? We know all the different factors that contribute to the morbidity of Black folks in this country and stuff, right? So we're waiting to see if we can get some people that are really skilled in that area, because a Get Right Within campaign, it doesn't challenge the government directly. It doesn't challenge the vaccine makers directly. It's like, look, in fact, the vaccine would work even better if people also had their innate immunity strengthened, right? People don't know about natural killer cells and all the foods that you can take, the mushrooms, onions, blueberries, and all the things to do that. But so it's an education process as opposed to a fear process, right? Right now, fear is used as a funnel pushing people to the vaccine. And we need to create a whole different conversation, right? And, you know, doctors are caught up in the mentality of thinking about vaccine. I've gone to a couple conferences, just the vaccine, we got variants coming. How are we going to, you know, give a shot here, a shot there? We gotta let the germ thing go. It's there, it's going to be there. You know, it'll be there next winter for sure, right? But unless we strengthen the immune system of the population and bring national attention to that, what are we going to do? Because I guarantee you, people are going to be bumped off by that vaccine, because there are any number of responses that can actually occur and are occurring. And I challenge folks to really go through that. If I don't even want to quote the figures I'm being quoted relative to deaths, or, I mean, how many times have you heard of somebody drops dead like 2-3 weeks after the vaccine? But of course, it's natural causes. Yo, this is like, come on. So I just can't go with the okie doke. So if anybody got an interest in helping me and, you know, getting folks behind that, I think then you can draw attention, in a different kind of way, So anyway, I just throwing that out there. And, even within your own practice, just, how do you begin to educate folks in a way where they're going to hear it and actually make the changes? Because I know if you down south, man, it's fast food city. It's a fast food landscape, man.
Oh, you know it.
Right. Anyway.
I'll say I share that. And before we go on, Dr. Hooker, please give your mother my regards.
Oh, she's right here, actually. I'll tell her.
Okay.
Hey, Fanta, how are you?
Now look at that.
Sister Fanta, how are you?
She's coming over to say hi.
Okay, brothers and sisters, I appreciate the preparation that you all did before coming in. I appreciate the candor with which you all spoke, and the sincerity and the commitment. And I think that one person wrote here, "Where's the information?" I don't know where they were, but it was a load of information that was given here, and people will be able to see it when I post it on YouTube, and you'll be able to, and I'm going to have to edit out a lot of the craziness, the having to scream to people to cut their, having to scream to people to cut their, I see what's going on. What's going on, Nima?
She was trying to come say hey, but then she walked away.
Okay, all right, she's shy. All right, so what I was saying is that we'll post it so that people can get this information. I think that each of you brought distinct and great information, and everybody who participated brought something. Now, any question? Does anybody see any questions in the chat that they were interested in? Any of my three principal speakers here, and if not, we're going to show that tribute to women again, because there's some people that haven't seen it, and then we're going to end our program. It's a beautiful musical tribute to women, the women that Sister Betty Dobson has singled out as immediately deserving of recognition.
Hello, I didn't put anything in the chat, but I think this is the quickest way to be recognized. Could one of the experts, doctors, speak about the reliability of the test? Because I've been reading some information that says that the test isn't even reliable and shouldn't even be used to determine whether someone has been infected.
It's a good question. I would have cut you off at the pass if I was distracted, because I don't want people calling out. Please put your question in the chat if you have a question.
Sorry about
Dr. Kakai, unmute yourself, Dr. Kakai.
And I think Robin.
So what I would say is it's called PCR testing. And PCR testing is used something to follow viral load. And basically what they're doing, they're looking at a few nucleotide segments within a certain part of the viral genome, right? And then what they're doing though in the Trump administration, and again, I'm getting this through another physician, so I haven't gone through secondary primary information, but when they amplify that like 50 times. And then from that, they extrapolate whether a person is actually positive or not. So within that, they've been documented that does create false positives. So supposedly the Biden administration now, the amplification is only 30. And that's supposed to be much more reasonable in terms of, less false positives. The cutoff is usually about 35. So, and I've had any number of patients with, they'll get a test one place, it's positive, same day, next day, they get a test and it's negative. So it's a little confusing. In my own practice, I'll rely a lot on symptoms and contacts. And so I will treat you, I will treat you like you have COVID-19 based on who you've been exposed to in your household. Again, with that caveat that a lot of people that have really strong innate immune systems, An innate immune system gives you broad spectrum protection. As you get older, it tends to get more focused. And the reason why most people die and get sick when they get older, to keep in mind, is that your digestive capacity to take in nutrients, to break down food, assimilate and incorporate the nutrients into your system, it becomes minimal. So you end up with trace deficiencies that then eventually lead to a named disease, a worsening of a disease process. So with older folks, I'm looking to see if there are any signs of digestive weakness, and I'm definitely recommending particularly mushrooms, different mushroom formulas to increase that innate immunity. And of course, as we get older, we can't eat like when we were 30. You can't, and you better get your rest. So, you know.
I'd like to also add a word on testing. There are actually 3 different types of tests that are being done for COVID. And the PCR actually, in my research, tends to have actually more false negatives than false positives, which may actually be even more confusing. The antibody test is kind of bulky, and I think that they're still in the process of developing that fully. The antigen test, I think, is interesting because they're trying to work that into a home, kind of like a home pregnancy test. I don't know how, I don't know where that is at this point in time. I know that that was something that they were talking about a few months ago.
There's some available, but they're like 84, 85% sensitivity.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
from what that's what they're saying on their labels. Right?
Okay, okay.
You guys so much. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. I appreciate
Thank you so much, Nima. Dr. Hooker, let me start getting formal. We got all them, not gonna waste them. Okay, thank you so much. And we're gonna actually end up now, but I'd like for anybody who wants to be on the mailing list for the next forum we have on this, and the next forum we have on anything, post your email address in the chat. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. You can actually even do it while I show I think you'll be able to still post in the chat as I show that tribute to women again. When that tribute to women ends, we're going to be ending the whole program. I want to thank each of our speakers, each of our participants,